The galaxy had always been a place of wonder and mystery, but for Earth, it was also becoming a battleground. Humanity's first contact with alien civilizations decades ago had led to the formation of the Galactic Council, a coalition of advanced species that claimed to seek peace and cooperation among the stars. But behind their polished diplomacy lay an agenda far darker than anyone on Earth could have imagined. John Carter, a seasoned politician and advisor to the U.S. president, stood in the Oval Office late one night. The room was dimly lit, the weight of recent events pressing down on him like a storm cloud. Across from him sat President Laura Bennett, her face pale but resolute as she reviewed classified documents spread across her desk. These weren't ordinary files. They contained evidence of corruption within the Galactic Council itself, evidence that implicated them in covert operations targeting Earth's sovereignty. "We can't trust them anymore," John said, his voice low but firm. "They've been manipulating us since day one." Laura nodded slowly, her fingers brushing over a photo of a destroyed research facility on Mars. It had been labeled an accident by the Council, but the truth was clear. It was sabotage. And now, whispers from trusted sources hinted at something even worse, an assassination plot against her. "I didn't sign up for this," Laura muttered under her breath, more to herself than to John. She looked out the window at the Washington Monument, glowing faintly in the distance. Earth isn't ready for another war. Before John could respond, the doors burst open without warning. A group of armed guards stormed in, their uniforms marked not with American insignias, but with the emblem of the Galactic Council. Their leader, a tall humanoid with sharp features and cold eyes, stepped forward. His name was Valen, a high-ranking enforcer known for his ruthlessness. "President Bennett," Valen said, his tone icy. "You are hereby detained for crimes against interstellar peace." "What crimes?" Laura demanded, standing up despite the obvious danger. Her heart raced, but she refused to show fear. "This is my planet. You have no authority here." Valen ignored her protests. With a wave of his hand, two guards grabbed Laura while others surrounded John. He tried to fight back, shouting objections, but it was futile. Within moments, both were subdued and dragged out of the office. Outside, chaos erupted as news of the arrest spread. Protesters gathered near the White House, demanding answers, but the Council's forces quickly dispersed them with advanced technology humanity couldn't match. Hours later, reports flooded global networks. President Laura Bennett had been executed by the Galactic Council for treason, a claim met with outrage and disbelief across Earth. For many, it felt like a declaration of war. Yet amidst the grief and anger, there was something else brewing beneath the surface, something ancient. Deep below the oceans, hidden in underwater caverns long forgotten by history, massive ships began stirring to life. They were relics of Earth's past, built during a time when humanity first reached for the stars, and then abandoned after treaties with the Council promised protection. These vessels weren't just machines, they were symbols of defiance, waiting patiently for the day Earth would rise again. As word of the president's death reached military leaders around the world, plans were set into motion. General Rachel Monroe, commander of Earth's defense forces, received a secure transmission from an unknown source. On the screen appeared blueprints of the ancient fleet, along with coordinates to their locations. "It's time," Rachel whispered, her jaw tightening. She turned to her aide, Alex, who stood silently beside her. "Tell every base we control to prepare. We're done playing nice." Above ground, people mourned their fallen leader, unaware of what lay ahead. Beneath the waves, engines roared to life, shaking the ocean floor. Earth wasn't going to take this lying down. Not anymore. The news of President Laura Bennett's execution spread like wildfire, igniting protests and riots in cities across the globe. People took to the streets, holding signs that read "Earth first" and "No more lies." Some chanted slogans against the Galactic Council, their voices filled with anger and despair. For decades, humanity had trusted the Council to guide them into a brighter future among the stars. Now, that trust was shattered. In New York City, Emily Dawson stood amidst a sea of demonstrators, her fists clenched as she watched footage of the president's arrest play on a massive screen above Times Square. The video looped endlessly, showing Laura's defiant stance before Valen's guards dragged her away. Emily felt sick to her stomach. She wasn't a soldier or a politician, just an ordinary woman who worked at a local cafe. But even she knew this moment would change everything. "They can't do this," Emily muttered to herself, tears streaming down her face. "They can't just kill our leaders like animals." Nearby, a man named Daniel spoke up, his voice trembling with rage. "They already did. What are we supposed to do now? Just sit back and let them take over?" Emily didn't have an answer. None of them did. But deep down, she felt something stirring, a spark of rebellion. If the Galactic Council thought they could crush Earth's spirit, they were wrong. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, General Rachel Monroe paced inside a secure command center buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, officers worked frantically at their stations, relaying information about the ancient fleet discovered beneath the oceans. Maps and schematics covered every available surface, glowing faintly in the dim light. Rachel's mind raced as she processed the enormity of what they were about to attempt. "Status report," she barked, stopping in front of a young officer named Alex. "The first wave of ships is operational." Alex replied quickly, glancing at his tablet. "We're still running diagnostics on the rest, but initial tests show they're combat ready." Rachel nodded, though her expression remained grim. These ships were relics from a time when humanity had dared to dream big, before the Council convinced Earth to disarm itself in exchange for protection. Now those promises felt like a cruel joke. "What about the crew?" Rachel asked. "Do we have enough pilots and engineers?" Alex hesitated before answering. "Not yet, ma'am. Most of these systems are outdated, and training will take time." Time was one thing they didn't have. Satellite images showed Council warships gathering near Earth's orbit, their intentions clear. They weren't just here to arrest dissidents. They were preparing to seize control entirely. Rachel turned to face the room, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "Listen up. We may not be ready, but we don't have a choice. Those ships are our only chance to fight back. Every man and woman in this room has a job to do, and I expect nothing less than your best. Understood?" A chorus of affirmatives echoed around the chamber. Despite the fear in their eyes, there was determination too. Humanity might have been caught off guard, but it wouldn't go down without a fight. Back on the surface, Emily found herself drawn toward a makeshift rally in Central Park. A man named Harold, a retired engineer with a gruff voice and steely resolve, had taken charge of the crowd. He held up a battered megaphone and shouted, "If the Council wants a war, then we'll give them one. But we need everyone, not just soldiers. Pilots, mechanics, doctors, teachers, we all have a role to play." His words struck a chord with Emily. She thought about her brother, Sam, who had always tinkered with engines in their garage. Maybe he could help repair some of those old ships, and maybe she could contribute too, even if she didn't know how yet. As night fell, Emily made her decision. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Sam. *, meet me tomorrow morning. There's something important we need to do. *. Unbeknownst to her, hundreds of others were making similar choices, from farmers leaving their fields to scientists abandoning labs. People from all walks of life began rallying together. They didn't know much about the ancient fleet or how to use it, but they shared one common goal: to protect their home. Deep underwater, the dormant ships continued awakening, their engines humming louder with each passing hour. Above them, the skies darkened as Council vessels loomed closer. Earth was no longer the helpless planet it once appeared to be. It was rising. And this time, it wouldn't back down. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Across the globe, people mobilized with a sense of urgency that bordered on desperation. Factories once used to produce cars and appliances were repurposed to manufacture weapons and spare parts for the ancient fleet. Engineers and mechanics worked around the clock, their hands blackened with grease, as they struggled to decipher the outdated systems of the massive ships. It was chaotic, but there was no time for hesitation. Emily Dawson and her brother Sam joined the effort almost immediately. They traveled to a naval base on the East Coast, where one of the largest underwater vessels had been brought to the surface. The ship towered over them, its metallic hull gleaming in the sunlight despite centuries of neglect. Sam whistled softly as he stared up at it. "This thing looks like it belongs in a museum," he said, shaking his head. "You sure we can get it running?" "We don't have a choice," Emily replied firmly, though doubt lingered in her own mind. She glanced at the crowd of volunteers bustling around the dock. Men and women of all ages carried tools, hauled supplies, and shouted instructions over the din. Everyone wanted to help, even if they weren't sure how. Inside the ship, the air was damp and smelled faintly of rust. Sam knelt beside an exposed panel, his fingers moving quickly as he tried to reconnect wires that hadn't seen power in centuries. Emily handed him tools when he asked, watching silently as sparks occasionally flew from the circuitry. "You know," Sam said after a while, wiping sweat from his forehead, "if this works, we'll be legends. Or dead." Emily shot back, though she couldn't suppress a small smile. Despite everything, she felt a strange sense of pride. For years, she'd lived an ordinary life, content to blend into the background. Now she was part of something bigger, something that mattered. Meanwhile, General Rachel Monroe coordinated Earth's defense from her underground command center. Intelligence reports indicated that the Council's forces were preparing to strike within days. Their warships had taken positions near the moon, and smaller scout vessels were already probing Earth's atmosphere. Time was running out. Rachel leaned over a holographic map displaying the locations of the awakened fleet. So far, only a third of the ships were operational, but it would have to be enough. She turned to Alex, who stood nearby with a tablet in hand. "How many pilots do we have?" she asked sharply. "Not nearly enough," Alex admitted. "Most of our experienced flyers are retired or working civilian jobs. We're trying to recruit anyone with flight experience, even gamers who've played simulations." Rachel sighed, rubbing her temples. This wasn't going to be easy, but then again, nothing about this fight was supposed to be. Elsewhere, Harold, the retired engineer who had rallied the crowd in Central Park, was putting his skills to use. He led a team tasked with retrofitting modern technology onto the ancient ships. The fusion reactors powering the vessels were crude by today's standards, but Harold believed they could be upgraded to match the Council's advanced weaponry. "This isn't just about fixing machines," Harold told his team one evening as they worked late into the night. "It's about proving that humanity still has a backbone. If we give up now, we'll never get it back." His words resonated deeply with everyone present. Even those who had never held a wrench before threw themselves into the work, determined to make a difference. As the final preparations continued, news reached Earth of another Council attack. A mining colony on Europa had been obliterated without warning. The message was clear: submit or face annihilation. Fear gripped many, but it also hardened resolve. Humanity wouldn't bow, not this time. In orbit, the first wave of Council ships began descending toward Earth. Their sleek forms glinted menacingly against the backdrop of space. On the ground, alarms blared as radar stations detected the incoming threat. The moment everyone had feared and prepared for was finally here. Deep beneath the oceans, the last of the ancient fleet roared to life. Engines surged, filling the water with vibrations that echoed like thunder. Above the waves, the skies darkened as storm clouds gathered. Lightning illuminated the horizon, casting long shadows over the land. Earth was ready, or as ready as it could be. And for the first time in decades, humanity stood united, prepared to fight for its survival. The first clash came at dawn. The sky above the Atlantic Ocean lit up with streaks of red and blue as energy beams from the Council ships tore through the atmosphere. Waves crashed violently against the hulls of Earth's ancient fleet, which had risen to meet the invaders. It was a sight no one could have imagined just weeks earlier, a battle between humanity's forgotten relics and the sleek, alien warships of the Galactic Council. On board one of the largest vessels, General Rachel Monroe gripped the railing of the bridge as the ship shuddered under enemy fire. Around her, crew members scrambled to adjust shields and return fire. Most of them were inexperienced, but their determination made up for what they lacked in skill. "Target their lead cruiser," Rachel shouted over the noise, her voice steady despite the chaos. She watched as the ship's cannons roared to life, sending bolts of plasma hurtling toward the Council's forces. One shot struck true, causing an explosion that sent fragments of metal spiraling into space. "Yes," Alex exclaimed from his station, punching the air in triumph. For a moment, hope flickered among the crew. They weren't just sitting ducks. They could fight back. But the Council wasn't deterred. Their ships moved with precision, firing coordinated bursts that overwhelmed Earth's defenses. Another vessel in the fleet took a direct hit, its engine sputtering before it began sinking back toward the ocean. Rachel clenched her jaw, forcing herself to stay focused. "Keep moving. Don't let them pin us down," she ordered. The fleet split apart, each ship breaking formation to avoid being targeted. It was risky, but it worked, at least for now. Meanwhile, Emily Dawson sat hunched over a console deep within her assigned ship. Her job was simple: monitor power levels and ensure the reactors didn't overload. Sam was nearby, working on a damaged turret that had jammed during the fighting. Sweat dripped down his face as he pried open the mechanism. "This thing's older than Grandma," he muttered, banging on it with a wrench. "Come on, work." Emily glanced at him briefly before returning her attention to the screen in front of her. Warning lights blinked incessantly, indicating strain on the reactor core. She adjusted some settings, trying to stabilize the output, but the numbers kept climbing. "We're pushing too hard," she said aloud, though no one seemed to hear her over the din of battle. Still, she refused to give up. This ship, and everyone on it, was counting on her. Outside, Harold and his team faced their own challenges. Their vessel had taken heavy damage, and smoke filled the corridors as fires raged unchecked. Harold barked orders, directing volunteers to contain the blaze while others patched holes in the hull. He knew they couldn't hold out much longer, but every second mattered. Every second gave Earth a chance. Back in orbit, the Council's commander, Valen, observed the battle with cold detachment. His sharp features twisted into a sneer as he watched Earth's clumsy attempts to resist. To him, this was little more than an inconvenience, a minor uprising to be crushed swiftly. "They're persistent," one of his subordinates remarked, standing beside him on the command deck. "More so than we anticipated." Valen shrugged dismissively. "Persistence means nothing without strength. Order the second wave to advance. Let's end this." As reinforcements entered the fray, the tide began to turn against Earth. More ships faltered under the relentless assault, their ancient systems unable to keep pace with the Council's superior technology. Panic spread among the crews, and for the first time, doubt crept into their hearts. Rachel saw it too, the fear in the eyes of her people, but she refused to let it consume her. Over the comms, she addressed the entire fleet. "Listen to me," she said, her voice cutting through the static. "We may not have their weapons or their speed, but we have something they don't. We have Earth behind us. We have billions of lives depending on us. If we fall today, then we fall fighting. For our families. For our future." Her words reignited a spark of courage. Crews doubled their efforts, pushing their ships beyond their limits. Pilots executed daring maneuvers, weaving between enemy fire to strike critical blows. Even civilians on board pitched in, carrying supplies, tending to the wounded, and patching up damaged systems by hand. For a brief moment, it seemed like Earth might stand a chance. But the cost was mounting. Ships burned in the sky, their wreckage raining down into the sea. Lives were lost, sacrifices made in the name of freedom. And yet, amid the destruction, a new resolve emerged. Humanity had been pushed to its breaking point, and it was only beginning to fight back. The battle raged on, and Earth's fleet was pushed to its limits. Ships that had once been symbols of hope now drifted in flames, their crews lost or struggling to survive. But even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity refused to surrender. The ancient vessels fought with a tenacity that surprised even their enemies, holding their ground against the Council's relentless assault. On board one of the surviving ships, Emily Dawson worked furiously to keep the reactor stable. Her hands trembled as she adjusted controls, sweat dripping onto the console. The warning lights blinked faster now, signaling critical levels. She glanced over at Sam, who was still trying to fix the jammed turret. His face was streaked with soot, but his focus never wavered. "Sam," she called out, her voice cracking under strain. "If we don't shut this down soon, the whole ship could blow." "I'm working as fast as I can," he shouted back, slamming his wrench against the stubborn mechanism. Sparks flew, and for a moment, it seemed like nothing would change. Then, with a loud groan, the turret finally moved. "Got it." Emily didn't have time to celebrate. She turned back to her station, her fingers flying across the keyboard. With a final adjustment, the reactor stabilized just enough to prevent catastrophe. She let out a shaky breath, leaning back in her chair. For now, they were safe, but only barely. Farther away, General Rachel Monroe coordinated the remaining ships from her flagship. The bridge was dimly lit, illuminated only by flashing alerts and holographic displays showing the battlefield. Each loss hit hard, but Rachel forced herself to stay focused. There was no room for grief. Not yet. "We need to regroup," she said firmly, addressing her officers. "Form up near the equator. We'll use the planet's magnetic field to mask our movements." One of the younger officers hesitated before speaking. "Ma'am, if we retreat now, they'll think we're weak. They might chase us straight into." "They'll chase us regardless," Rachel interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "But if we stick together, we stand a better chance of taking them by surprise. Trust me." Her plan wasn't foolproof, but it was all they had. Slowly, the surviving ships began to withdraw, slipping behind Earth's curve to avoid detection. The Council's forces paused momentarily, confused by the sudden disappearance of their targets. Valen, however, remained unfazed. "They're retreating," one of his lieutenants reported, staring at the tactical display. "Orders." Valen's lips curled into a cruel smile. "Let them run. They'll tire themselves out eventually. Then we'll finish them." Harold, meanwhile, found himself aboard a heavily damaged vessel that limped toward the rendezvous point. Fires still burned in the corridors, and smoke filled the air, making it hard to breathe. He led a group of volunteers through the chaos, checking for survivors and sealing breaches in the hull. "This isn't how I plan to spend my retirement," Harold muttered, coughing as he dragged a wounded crewman to safety. A young woman named Lisa helped him carry the man to the makeshift medical bay, where doctors worked tirelessly to save lives. "You're doing great," Lisa said, patting Harold's shoulder. "We wouldn't have made it this far without you." Harold grunted, though there was a flicker of pride in his eyes. "Just doing my part." As the remnants of Earth's fleet regrouped, Rachel called an emergency meeting with the captains of the remaining ships. Holograms of their faces appeared around the table, each bearing signs of exhaustion and stress. Despite everything, they listened intently as Rachel outlined her next move. "We've taken a beating, but we're not done," she began, her voice firm. "Their arrogance is our advantage. They think we're beaten, but we're going to prove them wrong." She explained her plan, using Earth's gravitational pull to ambush the Council's ships when they least expected it. It was risky, but it might be their only shot at turning the tide. "What about reinforcements?" one captain asked. "Can we call for more support?" Rachel shook her head. "This is all we've got. If we want to win, we'll have to do it ourselves." There was silence for a moment. then nods of agreement. These people weren't soldiers or politicians. They were ordinary men and women thrust into extraordinary circumstances. And yet, they stood united, ready to fight for their home. Hours later, the trap was set. Earth's ships positioned themselves carefully, hiding in the planet's shadow. Above them, the Council's armada loomed closer, unaware of what awaited. Then, with a single command from Rachel, the ambush began. Plasma cannons roared to life, catching the enemy off guard. Explosions lit up the sky as Earth struck back with everything it had left. For the first time, the Council faltered. Their perfect plan was unraveling, and humanity was proving harder to crush than they ever imagined. The ambush caught the Council completely off guard. Their sleek warships, which had seemed unstoppable just moments before, were now scrambling to respond to Earth's unexpected counterattack. Plasma bolts tore through space, striking with precision as humanity's ancient fleet unleashed its full fury. For the first time in the battle, the invaders hesitated. On board General Rachel Monroe's flagship, the tension was electric. The bridge crew worked tirelessly, their movements sharp and deliberate as they coordinated the assault. Rachel stood at the center, her eyes locked on the holographic display showing the chaos unfolding above Earth. Each successful hit against the Council filled her with a mix of relief and grim satisfaction. "We've got them on the ropes," Alex shouted from his station, pointing to a damaged Council cruiser that was struggling to retreat. "Keep pressing." Rachel nodded but didn't allow herself to feel too hopeful. "Don't let up. Target their command ship. Take out Valen if we can." Her words sent a ripple of determination through the crew. They knew who Valen was, the cold, calculating enforcer responsible for President Laura Bennett's execution. Taking him down wouldn't undo what he'd done, but it would send a message. Earth wasn't afraid anymore. Meanwhile, aboard another ship, Emily Dawson clung to her console as the vessel rocked violently under enemy fire. Her hands flew across the controls, rerouting power to keep the shields intact. Sam was nearby, manning one of the repaired turrets. His face was tense with concentration as he lined up shots, firing bursts of energy at the nearest Council ship. "Emily, I need more power to the guns." Sam yelled over the noise. "I can't hold this angle without frying the system." "I'm giving you all I've got," she replied, her voice strained. She adjusted the reactor output again, pushing the limits of the aging machinery. Sparks erupted from a nearby panel, forcing her to jump back. Smoke filled the air, but she ignored it, focusing solely on keeping the ship alive. Across the fleet, similar scenes played out. Harold and his team fought tirelessly to patch breaches in their hull, while volunteers manned stations usually reserved for trained personnel. Everyone did whatever they could to keep their ships in the fight. Even civilians who had never held a weapon before now operated turrets or carried supplies to wounded crew members. Above them, the Council's forces began to falter. Ships that had once moved with perfect coordination now scattered, trying to escape the relentless barrage. Valen watched from his command deck, his expression darkening with each passing second. He hadn't anticipated such resistance from a species he considered inferior. "What is happening out there?" he demanded, turning to his subordinates. "Why aren't they retreating?" One officer hesitated before answering. "Their tactics. They're adapting faster than expected. It's like they've been fighting wars for centuries." Valen snarled, slamming his fist onto the console. "Adaptation doesn't matter when you're outnumbered and outgunned. Order a full retreat, but not until we've destroyed their flagship. If we take Monroe out, the rest will crumble." As the order went out, the Council's remaining ships regrouped, focusing their firepower on Rachel's vessel. The flagship shuddered violently under the renewed assault, alarms blaring throughout the ship. Alex glanced up at Rachel, panic in his eyes. "They're targeting us directly," he warned. "Shields are down to 20%. Rachel clenched her jaw, refusing to give the order to flee. "Hold steady. We're the decoy. They'll follow us right into the next phase." Her calm demeanor steadied the crew, even as explosions rocked the ship. Outside, the Council's forces closed in, thinking they had cornered their prey. What they didn't see were the other Earth ships circling behind them, preparing to strike. At Rachel's signal, the hidden vessels launched a devastating volley. Torpedoes streaked through space, hitting the Council ships from behind. Caught between two fronts, their formation collapsed entirely. Fires erupted on multiple cruisers, including Valen's command ship. Inside his vessel, Valen staggered as the impact threw him off balance. Smoke filled the air, and red emergency lights bathed the room in an eerie glow. For the first time, doubt flickered in his cold eyes. "They're still fighting," he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. But there was no time to dwell on it. Alarms screamed around him, warning of critical damage. The battle wasn't over yet, but Earth had proven itself far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The final phase of the battle was chaos. Earth's fleet, battered but unbroken, pressed its advantage against the reeling Council forces. Valen's command ship listed heavily, its once imposing frame now scared and smoking from repeated hits. Inside, alarms blared incessantly as crew members scrambled to contain the damage. For the first time, fear rippled through the Council ranks. On board Rachel Monroe's flagship, the crew fought with everything they had left. The shields were nearly gone, and parts of the ship were on fire, but no one gave up. Rachel stood at the center of the bridge, her voice cutting through the noise as she issued orders. "Focus all remaining firepower on Valen's ship," she commanded. "We end this now." Alex relayed the order, his hands trembling but steady on the controls. The ship's cannons roared to life, unleashing a barrage of plasma bolts that struck true. One hit tore through the hull of Valen's cruiser, sending it spiraling out of control. Explosions erupted inside the vessel, lighting up the darkness of space like a dying star. Valen staggered to his feet, gripping a console for support. His sharp features were twisted with rage and disbelief. Humanity, a species he had dismissed as weak and disorganized, had somehow turned the tide. He barked orders to his crew, demanding an immediate retreat, but it was too late. Another volley from Earth's ships struck his cruiser, sealing its fate. As the command ship broke apart in a brilliant flash of light, the Council's remaining forces began to withdraw. Their sleek warships, once symbols of superiority, limped away from the battlefield, leaving behind debris and destruction. Earth's fleet didn't pursue them. They were too exhausted, their ships too damaged. But they had won. Against all odds, they had won. Back on Earth, news of the victory spread quickly. People poured into the streets, cheering and crying tears of relief. The images of burning Council ships filled screens around the globe, a testament to humanity's resilience. Emily Dawson watched the celebrations from her station, her body aching but her heart soaring. She glanced over at Sam, who sat slumped in his chair, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. "We did it," she whispered, still struggling to believe it herself. Sam managed a tired smile. "Yeah, we did, and I think Grandma would be proud." Elsewhere, Harold leaned against the wall of his ship, watching as volunteers tended to the wounded. His clothes were torn, his hands blistered, but there was a quiet pride in his eyes. Lisa approached him, holding out a canteen of water. "You should rest," she said gently. "You've earned it." Harold chuckled softly, taking the canteen. "Rest sounds good. But first, I need to make sure everyone else is okay." In orbit, Rachel Monroe finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. The bridge was eerily quiet now, the hum of engines the only sound. She stared out at the stars, her mind heavy with thoughts of those they had lost. Alex joined her, his expression somber. "We couldn't have done it without you," he said quietly. "You kept us together when it felt like everything was falling apart." Rachel shook her head. "It wasn't just me. It was every single person out there, on these ships, back on Earth, everywhere. This was humanity's fight, and humanity won." As the surviving ships began their descent toward Earth, The planet below glowed softly in the sunlight. It was battered and scarred, but it was still home. The Galactic Council had underestimated humanity, thinking it weak and divided. But they had forgotten one thing. Earth wasn't just a planet. It was a people bound together by hope, courage, and an unshakable will to survive. And now, the galaxy knew it.